It all started earlier that year. Spring came in March. Winter didn't manage to stay until the end. I was at the market from early morning. My hands were red from the cold, the flowers still wet from the dew. They were the first tulips, biting, fragile, bursting with the desire to bloom. I sold them to him too. I saw him before he came. He didn't come like the others, not in a hurry, not with a specific need. He just came. A slow step, a deep look. Shirt too thin for the wind. A hat on his head, not because it was stylish, but because it was used to it. He walked over to the fish, but looked at me. Then he came over. Herring, please. And tulips. How much for one? His voice was calm, as if there was nothing more important right now than those tulips. I answered. He paid. But he didn't leave immediately. He stood there, watching. That's the kind of man, he doesn't talk much, but when he does, listen. That day, he left with flowers in his hands, without haste. And I watched his back for a long time among the people in the market. I did not know at that moment that that look would be the beginning of everything. The following week, he came again, this time with different fish and two tulips. He left one for me. I laughed. I told him it didn't make sense to sell flowers and receive them at the same time. He said, "But I like the way you smell like spring, even when it smells like herring all around." The sea breeze came from him. He smelled of salt, fishing nets, and cold air. And something in that smell drew me in. There was no touch then. Just talk, long and short. Sometimes silence. He stood next to my wooden box when there were no customers. He listened. At no point did he ask anything unnecessary. Once he showed me his palm. The cut was fresh. The net broke. The sea wouldn't let me in today. I wrapped his hand with gauze from my bag. He kept his eyes open, but he wasn't looking at his hand. He was looking at me. I was scared at that moment, not of the blood, of how natural he was there. We started drinking tea, each to his own, but sometimes together. He told me about the pull, how the sea calls you even when you don't want to go, about how you dream of the sound of the waves at night. I told him about the countryside, where I had a hiding place from people as a child, and how I once wanted to be a painter, but life took me elsewhere. He said, "You still can. Everything that is not lived remains in you, as long as you breathe." A month later, we walked in silence along the shore. He gave me his hand, so simple, without warning, and I felt that hand was heavy, alive, present. We didn't say the word love. It didn't seem necessary at the time. We were, each on our own side, but side by side at the same time, without hurry, without much noise. We both understood that love does not have to be shouted, it has to be lived. When we started living together, nothing changed suddenly. No celebrations, no big promises. Just one day he brought his boots, took them off at the door, and stayed. His presence was silent but safe, the kind of man who imposes nothing but everything he does stays. The house was old, the stove creaked when I stoked it, the windows were sweating even in spring. He was one of those people who didn't need much, but who knew how to appreciate. He often looked at things, not with his eyes, but with his whole being. On the kitchen tablecloth, which had faded a little, at the morning mug, slightly cracked but still warm. He got up early in the mornings, very early. Before I woke up, he was already pulling on a shirt. I liked to listen to his movements. They were defined, familiar. The water bowl creaked, the rope of the nets hit the wall, and then the door. I was used to putting a scarf on him while he was still in the room. He was always in a hurry, but always accepted the touch. It was our language, quiet, practical, but important. When he went to sea, I was alone. At first I missed his voice, his laughter. But with time, I learned to listen in his presence, even when he was not there. Every time the wind picked up, I would go to the window and look out to sea. I couldn't see him far, but I knew he was there. He always came back. At home, I knitted him socks and a sweater. Not because he had to, but because knitting is a prayer. Every stitch a hope that he would be warm, that the sea would keep him warm. I had time. I used to talk to him in silence between chores. In my thoughts, I told him what I saw, that a snowdrop had bloomed at the door, that the milk bottle was warmer this morning, that the neighbor's dog had finally become my friend. I didn't need big things, just a return. When he came home, the whole world narrowed down to his benches in the hallway. I could hear him climbing up on the third step. It always squeaked louder. Then he took off his boots, quietly, respectfully, and entered the kitchen. He didn't look at me right away, but his shoulders relaxed, and I knew he was home. And so was I. He often sat in the kitchen and ate without saying a word. But I saw his gaze sometimes linger on my hand, on my mug. It was his gratitude. When we had more time in the evenings, we talked. Not much, but enough. Once he said, "You know, when everything settles down, we'll leave. You'll be where the mountains are covered with snow. I want to see you in the light that falls from another sky." I said nothing, but in my heart I was breathless. Because even though we lived in the same room, sometimes there was a whole sea between us. His thoughts still always pulled me away. And I was the shore waiting. No one had taught us how to keep love alive when silence becomes everyday life. We just did what we could. But deep in my heart, I wanted more. Not more things, but more of us. More looks, more touches, more moments when we are both just there, fully present. And he felt it. Once, without saying a word, he put his hand on my back as I walked by. Just for a moment, but that was all. It was everything we hadn't said. I don't know at what point it started. Nobody turns on silence like a light. It grows. Like fog. It's still clear in the morning, but suddenly you can't see the other hand in front of you. We were still living together. He still pulled on his boots in the mornings, still left tea in the thermos, still came back from the sea. But something had changed between us. Not a big event, not an argument, just distance. He was sitting in the kitchen, looking in the window, and I was sitting next to him. But I felt like there was a glass wall between us, an invisible, unspoken wall that allowed me to hear but not to feel. I wanted to ask, "Are you still thinking about us?" But instead I asked, "Was there a wind at sea today?" And he replied, "There is always wind." Sometimes it seemed that we had become two fellow passengers on the same train. We are both looking out of the window, seeing the same scenery, but we are no longer looking at each other. I started to write him a letter, not one of reproach, just a simple letter, like the heart would say in a quiet voice. "You are beside me, but I miss you. I miss your gaze. I miss your hand on my back. I miss your voice when I don't expect it anymore. I miss us." I didn't know when I would give it to him. Maybe after a quiet day. Maybe when he notices. Maybe never. I put the letter in the cupboard, under the plates we used only for guests. Where things are kept that you don't want to throw out, but you don't use either. I thought it was a good place for something you want to say but don't have the strength. He didn't realize. Or he did, but he was silent. We both waited for the other to speak first. Like children hiding in the corners of the room and pretending everything is fine. And weeks went by in that waiting. Months. The seasons changed. The cat grew older. Our mugs, a little more faded. But in my heart, I had one thought. If I don't talk now, will I be able to talk? I started to write more. Not just for him, for myself too. About the things I want. about what it would be like if we went back to that place by the river where he once said he wanted to hear me sing. I never sing. I thought, he has forgotten, but I still remembered. And that was the hardest thing to remember. Once he came home a little early. I was at the table, writing, and he came over, looked at me, but didn't say anything. His look was long. He sat down opposite, and he said, "You're tired of my presence. It's not my presence at all, is it?" I didn't know what to say. I had been silent for so long that the words had forgotten their way. But I just nodded, and he understood. He didn't go to bed right away that night. He poured us both tea. He sat down. We sat in silence for a long time, but this time it was different. Not empty, but determined. And then he said, "After the next trip, just us. Let's go. I want you to smile again, not only in the eyes, but also on the lips." I smiled, quietly, a little pretentiously, but I smiled. And that evening, I almost gave him the letter, but I thought, not yet. After the next trip, always after. It was unusually quiet that morning. He didn't walk around in a hurry as usual. A cup fell. There was no sound of his footsteps on the third step, which always creaked. He was already dressed when I left the room. He was sitting at the table, just sitting. The thermos was already filled. The nets were put up, and he was just sitting, looking out the window at the bare trees outside. I walked over. He looked at me. The look was calm, not hasty. He smiled, a small, tiny smile. The kind of smile one gives when one knows something one is not going to say. And then he said, "Last trip. After that, everything will be different. We will be leaving. You will choose the direction. I'll just be by your side." At that moment, I wanted to hug her. I wanted to say, "Don't go today." That was our mistake. That calm agreement not to talk about what was important. We thought, if both understand, no words are needed. But sometimes words are a bridge over the gap. He put on his jacket, took his gloves. He stopped at the door. He turned to me again. There was something soft in his eyes. He didn't say anything more, just looked. And left. The door closed. I heard his footsteps. 1, 2, 3. And then silence. I stood there. In my hand was the same letter I had written months before. I read it again. The lines had faded a little. I had held it too long. "I miss you, not things, not dreams, but you, the part that was once just me." And I waited. As always, I waited for the evening. But he didn't come. That evening, the wind picked up. Then it rained heavily. Then a message from the harbor. "One of the boats has not returned." I did not panic yet. I was still hopeful. He always came back, but he always came back. At night, I could not sleep. I sat by the window with his sweater in my lap. It still had his smell, the salt, the sea, the man who was mine. The next morning, nobody said anything. But I already knew. I walked out onto the pier. The wind was pulling my hair. The sky was as empty as dried eyes. There, out at sea, where there was nothing to see, there he was. In those days, I moved his things. Slowly, with dignity. Each thing said something. His hat, his boots, his notebook, which contained only one phrase. "Mountains. You promised her mountains." I sat down and cried. Not like in the movies, not out loud. I just sat there, and everything that had accumulated flowed out of me. That letter. I took it out of the cupboard. And finally I read it, not as a letter to him, but as a final affirmation to myself. Next time, when there are two of us, I won't be silent. I will speak. I will say. I will have the courage not only to wait, but also to give. Because love becomes a shadow when it is silent for too long. After he left, the house remained silent, but it was no longer the wall of silence that had been between us. It was a different sound of silence, empty, yes, but also true. Nothing was silent. Everything was just over. At first, I didn't know what to do with his things. Should I keep it, or sort, or just leave it as it was? I chose not to hurry anything. Every morning I sat at his chair. The kettle was silent. His mug stood on the shelf. I didn't touch it. His fingerprints were still there. Weeks later, I finally touched his jacket. I kept it with me as a blanket. I inhaled. He was there, but now only in smell. And then I started to walk. I left the house every day, not to get somewhere, but to come back to myself. I walked to the river where we used to sit. There was a silence that no longer hurt me. There I heard the birds, the barking, my breath. One day I put on his sweater, took out my old sketchbook, and went to paint. I hadn't held a paintbrush for decades. He had always said I should. And now, I finally gave myself permission. Every line on the paper was a breath. Every color was a word I'd been holding on to. I didn't write him letters anymore. I painted our unsaid. And in the way the colors blended, I finally felt his presence not as a loss, but as a part of me. People in the village asked if I needed help. Some were silent, looked pitying. I smiled at them, not because everything was fine, but because I finally understood he gave me everything he knew. And I did what I could. Life went on, not in a loud, happy rhythm, but in a gentle, clean flow. I started to clean up the garden, planting, cultivate. And every time the sun hit my face, I whispered his words. When everything settles, we will live. You will dance. We will be just us. Now I dance alone, in my room, by the window, slowly, till tears. But I dance. And every time someone asks me if I love someone, I say, yes, because love doesn't end when a person is absent. It continues to be in the way you breathe, how you give, how you live. And yes, I forgive myself for being silent for too long. I forgive him for not making it. And I learned one thing: never put off love until tomorrow. Tomorrow may not come. Now, if I feel it, I say. If I see, I touch. If I love, I don't write a letter. I speak. And if I ever meet someone again who looks like him, I will not be silent again.